Okay, if I can have everyone's attention, please. I'd like to start on time. So, you might have seen in the email that I've recently sent today and the last one that our social contract this evening is for 90 minutes. Yes, 90 minutes. You can escape now, if you wish. But it's not, I don't think that it's going to be appropriate or possible for me to treat this as I would like to in an hour. I don't even think 90 minutes is enough, but we're going to attempt it. And so I ask, please, that you give me your attention. I'm sure that there will be questions. It may very well be that questions may need to happen at the end, unless there's something so pressing that you don't feel that we can go on because I've said something. And I will stay for that afterwards. Before I begin, though, I want to say this. This is not an easy shiur to give, for many reasons. Obvious ones and perhaps not obvious ones. I'm not going into why it's not an easy shiur to give, but it isn't. Our sexuality is the strongest drive that we have as human beings. And therefore, it is not only infused with great deal of emotion, of our psychology, of our humanity. It is the center, very much the center of our lives. And it manifests in many ways. It is peculiar, our sexuality. We like to think that we've got it all worked out. Nobody has their sexuality all worked out. The only reason we don't know that is because... I'm going to wait for everybody to come in. I can't talk like this. I need focus. The only reason that we don't have it all worked out, or that we don't know necessarily, or we can live in the illusion that we do, is because we don't talk about it very much. We're not terribly open about it. And even when we are, we're not. Because it's always clouded or shrouded in whatever it is we want it to be. We struggle with it, all of us, every single one of us. And the reason why we struggle with it is because it has a great deal to do with the nature of our relationship to the world. So whether our sexuality is manifesting actively and physically, or whether it is an element of my psychology and my feeling, it is the element of my identity that I engage with to the rest of the world. It's how I express myself outwards. It is for this reason that as far as Torah is concerned, we have Brit Milah on the 8th day, so that we mold our identity around Brit Milah, as opposed to having to take care of it later on in life. It is why the Mekubalim in Kabbalah, they look at the Milah itself, both male and female, the sexual organs of reproduction, as Yesod, as the foundation of a person's identity. The reason I'm saying this is because, only one reason. It's a serious topic, and I take it with that kind of trepidation. I am not coming to this topic cavalierly. As a matter of fact, I have probably spent more time thinking about and putting out and organizing my thoughts with regards to this topic than any other shiur I've given in the last 3 years. And it still might not be good. Yeah? Chances are, I will upset everybody in this room tonight. I will upset probably everyone in this room tonight on one level or another, whether you're gay, straight, religious, not religious, whatever the case may be. The chances are I'm going to say something that strikes an uncomfortable chord. So I have two options, given that that's the reality. I knew that that would be the reality when I decided to give the shiur. And I've decided to do it anyway. And the reason that I've decided to do it anyway is not because I think I have all the answers. I don't. But I think that nobody's talking about it. And I think in the Orthodox world, very few people are talking about it. And so, I don't claim to have all the answers. I may say things that we will find out to be incorrect in our developments and thought and research and so on and so forth. I may say things like I said that you might be quite upset at me for saying. All of that risk I am taking tonight. And I'm being extremely vulnerable in front of you tonight and in the recording and whoever else is going to hear me, and I'm sure that people are going to hear this shiur. Okay? But I will say to you that I have spent time. I'm not talking about the months in prepping this shiur. I have spent years and years and years thinking about this issue, researching this issue, studying this issue, looking at environments, neighborhoods, lifestyles, law, history. I've spent time, and the reason that I've spent time on it is because of what I opened with. Our sexuality is the foundation of our identity. And it is so powerful a force within us that we are afraid of it. Because it's the one thing within us that we just are not sure how to control. There's a lot of things that we don't control, our appetite, our sleep, a whole bunch of things. But this one, it's almost as though we feel that we are struggling with something else inside of us. It is the very force that is life-giving in this world. It is the one force that allows for life to exist on this planet in the great majority. The great majority of reproduction on this planet is sexual reproduction, not asexual reproduction. So don't take it lightly. I don't. And that is why I'm saying that whatever it is that I'm going to say tonight, I say with trepidation, because we are dealing with some serious, serious stuff here. So my disclaimer is out, yeah? It's clear? Okay, we have love in the room? Good. No, that's very important. I'm banking on the fact that there's love in the room. Okay? All right. The first thing I'm going to open with this is with this. In order to be able to really hear what I'm going to say tonight and to be able to be in and absorb what it is I'm going to say tonight, it is important that you accept or understand that at least I accept, my frame of mind is, that the Torah was given to us by God. I'm going to explain why that is the case. Okay? I'm going to ask everybody, please, for this shiur especially, quiet phones, focus. Okay? Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because if we look at the Torah being given to us by God, we see a mitzvah as a mutual endeavor. We see a mitzvah as a mutual endeavor with God. Something that He is communicating to us for our sake. Not as an intrusion, not so that He can get His kicks to watch us jumping through hoops for Him, but because of love. And because there is concern on God's part for our greatest good. That is my frame of mind. It is the way that I live my life, and in my classroom, that's how I teach. You are not obligated to learn with me in my classroom. But now, you're in my classroom. And that is my perspective. And so, one of the things that occurs when I recognize Torah in that framework is that I don't have entitlement. There's no such thing really for me in my humanity as entitlement, as I deserve something. I don't deserve anything. All I have are choices. And when I have a mitzvah presents to me a reality that may not be comfortable for me. It may not even be something that in my personal life works for me. And that's something that Rambam writes explicitly in the Moreh Nevuchim. Nobody quotes this Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. It's on your pages, right? By the way, yeah, you can pull it up here. It's very important to have the sources for this year. Yeah, I'm not going to read through it. I'm going to tell you where it is. It's towards the very end. It's number 39. It's the last source. No, it's the second to last source on your sheets. And where the Rambam says, Al titpaleh she'en matarot haTorah mitkaimim bekol echad ve'echad. Don't be shocked that the overall philosophical goals of the Torah or the overall general principles of the Torah don't work for every single individual that is a member of Israel. Some of the mitzvot are going to really rub you the wrong way. Ela mithayev behlet. It's required without question. Shimatzu anashim she'en oto hanihul hatorati mevinam shlemut. That when they lead their lives, it's without question there are going to be people on this planet that will lead their lives according to Torah, and the Torah will not provide them wholeness in its entirety. This is the Rambam. Why? Ki hatzurot hativ'iyot haminiyot lo yusag kol shematchayev mehen bekol echad ve'echad. Because when you have an array of creation that is developing essentially in a random system, there is going to be anomalies that come out. I'm not giving this as a prerequisite for homosexuality. I'm saying it as a principle of Torah. It is possible that one can lead a life of Torah, and because of my individual circumstances, the entirety of Torah doesn't mesh perfectly with my circumstance. And therefore I am left lacking as a result of my adherence to a complete life of Torah as a result of my situation. And that's what the Rambam is saying. He says, Lo yitachen sheyu hamitzvot nirshamot kefi shinuyei matzavei bnei adam hazmanim. The Torah could not be written in a way that would constantly respond to the changes of natural life on this planet. Especially not with the mass of variables that are present in the human condition. God gave principles, not detailed law. And since principles were given, there are situations where principles might not be applied well to a particular minority detail. You following this? Okay? I'm not asking you whether you're questioning this. I'm asking if you understand what the Rambam is saying. Okay? That's the Rambam's presentation in the Moreh Nevuchim, which is a very serious presentation. Because what he's saying is that the nature of Torah is not perfectly tailored to every single detail in Maaseh Bereshit, even every single human being in Maaseh Bereshit. The majority of it works for the majority of human beings, and even the majority of it works for all human beings, but there's going to be elements of it that may not work and bring a person to complete shlemut because of a unique situation that is a minority situation. The Torah spoke to the klal and the majority. It happens to be the klal of the Torah itself, that when I have doubt as to which principle I should go by, or even which law I should go by, I go by the majority. Okay, so that's one. I'm only going to be speaking tonight about male homosexuality. And the reason why I'm only speaking about male homosexuality is because the difference between male homosexuality legally and female homosexuality legally is so disparate in Torah and so different in Torah, it can't really be treated in the same treatment. So it's on the sheets, the source for the issues of lesbianism and so on. I'm not discussing it tonight. That maybe we'll discuss another time, but really it's only a 5-minute shiur. It's not a very long thing, right? This is a whole other thing. And what we have to open with, I think, is this. Historically, there was no word in any society for a homosexual or gay. The word didn't exist. And the reason why the word didn't exist is because the individual didn't exist in society. That does not mean that homosexual sex was not occurring between males throughout all of human history. Rather, throughout all of human history, it is ubiquitous. It is always there. It's been happening since the dawn of humanity and before. Right? So even in the animal kingdom we find it. And one of the major reasons that we find it, only one reason, only one, there are many, one of the major reasons we find it is logistical. And that is the lack of equality in the seed of the woman and the seed of the man. The seed of the man is abundant, plentiful, constantly being produced, and the seed of the woman is singular and very set. Which is why in ancient society, and certainly in the animal kingdom, the females don't have so much trouble becoming pregnant and conceiving. The males are always at odds and competing in order to be able to find the female. And so that leaves surplus. And because of surplus and high sexual drive, which is part of the nature of humanity, you're going to engage in sexual involvement or sexual union where you have the opportunity to do so. And it may be with your same sex, it may be with an opposite sex. It wasn't a hang-up. So one of the things that we're going to have to understand before we even delve into this question is which social conventions and prejudices we need to hang at the door. Because the whole concept that we have about homosexuality, certainly in terms of my experience talking to people and dealing with people and so on and so forth, has nothing to do with Torah law at all. It has only to do with my cultural feelings about what I think and feel about homosexuality. The Torah actually has very little to say about it. And we're going to look at it. But I do think that it's very important to be able to look at it historically in order to be able to understand what we're dealing with over here. So I only have a few samples for you on the source sheets, right? But in ancient cultures, homosexual relations happened between males all the time, but in very specific circumstances. In the majority of circumstances, it occurred in terms of what we call pederasty. And what that is that there was an older male and a younger male. And the older male was mentoring, in some capacity, the younger male. And part of that mentorship involved sex. Part of that, the question why that involved it, could be manyfold, right? In other words, the answer to that question could be manyfold, right? Probably it was because of sexual drives at the bottom, at the end of the day. But reasons were given for it, right? In ancient tribes, very often, and I'm going to have to, you'll forgive me, but I'm going to have to use sometimes some explicit terms over here because we're talking about sexuality, so I hope that everybody's grown-ups and we're in Britain and not in America where nobody can handle any of this stuff, right? The Americans are very, very sheepish. Yeah? So there was a thinking, which is very understandable, that the semen had tremendous strength. And that it was the source of virility. I mean, after all, you could create life with this stuff, right? I mean, it's a serious thing. And so if you can use this in order to be able to raise a young man and provide virility for him, then by all means. And that was part of what was done in ancient civilizations, ancient tribes. You went and had a mentor, right? And you were raised and taught how to hunt. And you were taught how to act and survive in the wild and so on and so forth. And perhaps you might be given a little bit of gift, of male reproductive, substance. And this was your passageway into adulthood. It wasn't, however, a lifelong homosexual relationship. It was that. And that was the nature of the interaction. And that interaction occurred throughout human history in various modules and moderations. So in Greece, it was very prevalent. In Greece, this was part of a rite of passage of maturity. Men, older men, never slept with other men. That was absolutely unacceptable. It was a no-no in society. Why? Mainly because the male that was a receiver in that act was considered disgraceful because they were effeminate. They were looked at as a woman. Why would you make yourself like a woman in a relationship? The male is the dominant one, which was always the case in society, right? The male is the one that's acting in the act, not receiving in the act. And therefore, the male will be the one that always... But if you got a male that's receiving that wasn't acceptable in Greek culture. A boy is a different story. So people think, that ancient Greece was a homosexual society and they had gays running around. It wasn't that. What it was, there was not a word for it. It was only a question of the act. And the only thing that was acceptable was something that we would jail people for in our society today. They slept with pubescent boys. From the age of 12 to 18, your bar mitzvah gift was you got a nice mentor who took you on. And not only that, this was serious. The mentor courted a young boy. His family knew about this. It wasn't like he was doing this against the law. I mean, this was part of society. And you were mentored and you were given gifts. And the boy had to be very judicious in terms of which gifts and who it was that he accepted gifts from. Because to be on the receiving end was shaky. You had to be looked at. It's like, oh, of course, for this guy and these gifts, this is what good move. But that was the system. And once the boy hit around 18, 17 years old, he also ended up finding younger boys that this was part of his development and passage. But by the age of 30, you were married with kids. Didn't matter whatever your feelings and so on and so forth. If there happened to be some fringe people that were acting in this way in society, so then they had to deal with whatever scrutiny there was, as far as that's concerned. But the only way that these homosexual relations were able to happen was if the male who was involved was either going to be married or married, right? And they had a family. They were set up essentially in society. But this was acceptable. And it's been acceptable throughout all of human history until the 1700s. In some form or another. Till today, we've got problems with it, but it was accepted and part of society as a whole. In Roman culture, it wasn't exactly the same. It was only with slaves. Not free men with other free men. That certainly was a no-no. And so it's written, they write, I have a number 2. If a Roman wanted secure affection, respect, and faithfulness, then he chose a wife. If he wanted sexual passion, anguish, and romantic ardor, he chose a youth. But that was an acceptable thing in society. The Celts, I'll leave you to read on your own. It's its own thing. But I think that we should see number 4. In all human societies, other than those under the influence of the Christian religion, it has been legitimate for males to have sexual relations with each other. That was societally legitimate. Yeah? Remember, there's no Torah in this place, right? There's certainly no Christianity. This is all pre-Torah, right? This is human society sans Judeo-Christian value. Remember, that's a big thing. We don't think of society without Judeo-Christian value. We're not used to it. We're talking about the proliferation of Torah in any major way. Anywhere. This was what was normal in terms of regular society. All over the place. In all human societies, other than those under the influence of the Christian religion, it has been legitimate for males to have sexual relations with each other. There were 2 restrictions. And this was ubiquitous. 2 major restrictions. They also married and produced families, and the adult male was always the penetrator. In the ancient world, there was no need for such a word as homosexuality because the concept did not exist. This is how it was manifest. Being that that's the case, understanding that this is the nature of culture that we're dealing with pretty much anywhere, now think of the Torah speaking. The Torah is speaking to this. This is what's going on. Right? Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that the Torah is only responding to this. I'm saying that the nature of the Torah's presentation is sensitive to this context. Even in the stories of the Torah, the famous one is the story of Sodom, which is why sodomy is called sodomy. Yeah? It is only in, you read that story in modern times and you think that it was a gay city. It wasn't a gay city. This wasn't West Hollywood. I grew up in West Hollywood. I'm telling you, this wasn't West Hollywood. What this was an attempt to subjugate and humiliate. And the reason they were doing this in Sodom was because you were not allowed to take people in. It was a big no-no in Sodom. We are not a welfare state. And you are not going to turn us into a welfare state. And if you want to rape people by giving them things and stealing from them their capacity to stand on their own 2 feet, we will take care of that for you. Not a problem. By all means, can we please see them outside? And that's exactly what happens over here. So it's a question of dominance. And it always was. Always. It had nothing to do, I'm going to say this out here and then I'm going to come back to it, so let it linger in the air. It had nothing to do with love. As a matter of fact, most sex in the ancient world had nothing to do with love, certainly not marriage. Marriage, love in marriage, is a modern construct. For the majority of human history, and this is going to be very important for our presentation, for the majority of human history, love was not part of marriage. If it was a nice serendipitous incidental. You were lucky. You did not marry for love. It was a romantic development in the romantic time period. It wasn't something that happened. We'll get back to that. Okay, so understand that what we're talking about here is sex and sexual connection and sexual union and what sex is used for in society. And we make the mistake of thinking that the majority of time in human history, sex was used for love and connection. It wasn't. The majority of time it was used for pleasure and dominance. So if I look at Sodom, it makes perfect sense what was going on in Sodom. And that's why Lot comes out and he says, please don't do this. It's not something you should do. He says, Vaikru Lot, they called to Lot and said, Ayeh nashim asher ba'u elecha halayla. Where are those men that you brought into your house tonight? What do you think? You're going to turn this into some welfare state? Going to start charity all over the place? Why are we going to have people sleeping on the streets tomorrow night? We'll take care of this for you. We'll rape them for you. It's not a problem. Because that's what you're doing, Lot. That was what was going on in Sodom. He comes in, he closed the door after him, he says, he says, please don't do this. So that's the presentation. There was only one other really situation in the ancient world in where we had homosexual relations. And that was in idolatry. I mean, it was essentially in whatever worship was going on for the deity. You had prostitutes, cult prostitutes that were set up, and that sex was part of how it is that you served, which was very convenient. Which is also part of the human drives, which is why the Hakamim say about Israel, the only reason we really ever engaged in idol worship was because it gave us an opportunity to have sex en masse, publicly, without having to worry about it. Hetiru lahem arayot befaresia. We were able to do it under the banner of religion. It was fantastic. So the Torah prohibits two things. Cult prostitution for a male, and lying with a male as you would a woman. And it's talking to both sides, saying this isn't acceptable. This kind of interaction isn't acceptable. Okay? Let's take a look. Number 6. Number 6, we read it this week. V'tzachar lo tishkav mishkavei isha. You are not to lie with a man as you would a woman. Toivahi, it's a toivah. We're going to come back to toivah in a minute. I'm going to look at that in a minute on its own. So this is the prohibition, yes? Not like you would a woman. And so it clearly sees that the male, certainly on the receiving end, is a woman, right? So like a woman, right? That's an issue. But even the penetrator in Torah is not accepted. So what Torah is addressing over here is this relationship, this agreement that you've got all over society in terms of mentorship and what have you and so on. We're not doing this. Israel will not have this as part of their society. Okay? That's one thing the Torah puts out. Says it again in Kedoshim, it assigns the death penalty for the prohibition, for the transgression. Okay? I'm not going to get into now the death penalty. It's all over Torah. This is my approach to the entire thing, and we can do this on another shiur. All over Torah, the death penalty is not so that we should be bloodthirsty and put people to death. The death penalty is to define morality downwards. It sets a bar for the nature of this thing. It was practically impossible to kill people. It was practically impossible, certainly without ayot. Certainly with sexual prohibition, it was practically impossible. And if you were Rabbi Akiva, you never killed anybody on the Beit Din, right? So we're going to leave that for now. It's not something that's unique to this. It's something that is an issue throughout Torah when it provides a death penalty. It should be just as outrageous that if you light a fire on Shabbat, we push you off a cliff. Okay? Okay. Fine. The Hiskuni, the reason I'm saying this is because the Hiskuni says, he points out over here, Mishkevei Isha v'lo ma'aseh hidudin. If you have in your translation or premature withdrawal of the party's male organ, that's incorrect. And whoever translated this translated it incorrectly. It just doesn't exist in the Hebrew. Ma'aseh hidudin simply means fondling as opposed to penetration. Right? It's not legally appropriate either. Right? Because penetration, as far as halakha is concerned, is even the beginning of penetration. Right? So, it's not an acceptable thing. What the Hiskuni is saying is, the prohibition of the Torah is specific to intercourse. Nothing more. In other words, the problem of homosexual union is specifically the act of intercourse. Nothing else. I'm not saying that nothing else is permitted. We'll deal with that in a minute. What the Torah is prohibiting between two males specifically is intercourse. It is not prohibiting disposition, attraction, feeling. Nothing is discussed in the Torah in line with the whole rest of human history, where there wasn't a word for this in the lexicon. There was no word for it in the language because it wasn't manifesting in this capacity. So what the Hiskuni is saying is that fondling certainly does not come under the prohibition outlined here. It may be some other prohibition, but it's not what's outlined over here. Clear so far? Okay. The other thing that it says is about the cult prostitution. So it says in the Torah in Devarim 9, Lo tiye kedesha mebenot Yisrael, ve'lo yekadesh mebnei Yisrael. Lo yekadesh means you can't have a male prostitute in the Torah in your vicinity. Male prostitute wasn't for women. The problem is it didn't work very well because we had them. And they were all over Israel at certain times. And so it says in Melachim, Gam kadesh haya ba'aretz. There were plenty of male prostitutes all over Eretz Yisrael. Asu kechol ha'to'avot ha'goyim asher urisha l'naim pnei bnei Yisrael. They were doing what everybody else was doing. So it was all over the place. So it's clearly something that is very prevalent. So if there's one thing that we see, interestingly enough, is that at least bisexuality is all over the place for the majority of human history. It's completely normal that this should manifest in society. Uncomfortable? It's the truth. And that goes hand in hand and in line with the fact, and this is also going to be uncomfortable for everybody because we're not comfortable with our sexuality. But the reality is that it's very rare in humanity to find exclusive heterosexual feelings or exclusive homosexual feelings and actions and so on and so forth, where a person cannot imagine what on earth could be arousing and attractive in someone of the same sex. It's a spectrum. And the evidence historically is that it's a spectrum. Is that there was openness on many situations in many areas for homosexual relations and heterosexual relations. The same person. That was what happened most of the time in history. It was perfectly open. And if you had a situation where it was open to you, then you took it. If you didn't have it, then you didn't take it. Maybe it wasn't for you, so you didn't do it. Whatever the case may be. But it was something that was not an issue in society unless it was in terms of Torah. The Torah comes and says, not in this society. That act is not something that we're going to absorb. So this is an issue because it means that it's part of humanity. And Torah is saying it's not to be acted upon in Torah law. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying not the act in Torah law. We find further that, interestingly, the whole idea of pederasty is even manifest halachically. So when it talks about what we've got to be considered, what we have to consider in terms of homosexuality, is only one thing. Outside of the actual prohibition, where Harambam says, look, you're not allowed to do this, or the Shulchan Aruch says the act of intercourse between two males is not permitted, there's only one other area really where it says, look, we have to question whether there's an issue. And what is that? Can an unmarried male teach young boys? It's the only question. Why? Because that's where it happens in society. Which is why we get nervous. So the Gemara says, "My tama." Why is it that a bachelor can teach children? We allow it in Torah. Can teach boys, right? Why? Says, "Amaru lo Rabbi Avi lo nechshedu Israel mishkav zachur." Because in general we don't worry that they're going to do this. Oh, well, that seems very naive. No, it's not naive. Because that system, remember, it is a societal construct. It is not simply part of the human condition that this particular societal relationship is inherent. Because it changed throughout different societies. It manifested differently in societies. I mean, maybe you could look at the Celts. I say Celts. I don't know if you say Celts, whatever it is. The Celts were these massively ferocious warriors, right? Tall, powerful men that preferred men in their society. So Aristotle writes about them, but if you want to look at number 3, Aristotle in Politics observed that the Celts esteemed love between men. Diodorus Siculus gave us a fuller picture. The men are much keener on their own sex. They lie around on animal skins and enjoy themselves, with a lover on each side. The extraordinary thing is that they haven't the smallest regard for their personal dignity or self-respect. Assuming that they needed to worry about their personal dignity and self-respect, in their circles it wasn't an issue of personal dignity and self-respect. They were massively powerful, ferocious warriors. Tomorrow they're going out to war and they were able to annihilate everybody in their path. This is how they enjoyed spending their time. Women were complicated. You got to keep your mind focused on war. I mean, you don't have to negotiate complications. Seriously. And then, furthermore, this isn't looked down upon or regarded as in any way disgraceful. On the contrary, if one of them is rejected by another to whom he's offered himself, he takes offense. So it's manifest. The sexual drives are present. The attraction may even be present. What begins to be entertained and open is extremely societal. Don't make the mistake of thinking that makes it any less real. Or that it is any easier to address or change. Not at all. We'll get there in a little bit. But it is connected. The biology and the sexual drive is connected always to societal constructs and situations. Before we're born. Societies are powerful. Mindsets of society are more powerful than you imagine. Our very sense of money is entirely determined on the mutual agreement of people in society. If you think that's not real, please deposit your money on my stender before you leave. I will happily take it from you. I consider it to be very real. So that's the reality. That's the situation. So as far as the Torah is concerned, that's something that we're not going to bring into society, says the Torah. We can't have that act happen. But as far as the teachers teaching the kids, we're not worried about it because it's not something that's cultivated in our society. And so it's not at the door. It's not at the threshold. It's not within realm of consideration. And do not underestimate when we say that something is not within the realm of consideration, it's serious. People only do things that they entertain as possible. That's the way that human beings act. There are exceptions, but even the exceptions are because they've entertained it as possible when nobody else entertained it as possible. So suddenly things become acceptable or doable in society because society has accepted it in terms of what it is that we do. It doesn't mean that there's no dissonance. It doesn't mean that I feel dissonant in terms of my desire or need and so on and so forth. But it's definitely a powerful manifestation in society. So as far as this was concerned, the Hachamim didn't feel that they needed to sanction it because they didn't worry about it as a major problem. Could very well be that today it's not the case. I would argue that today it isn't the case. It's a completely different world than the world that they were talking about. And the possibilities are completely different than the world that they were talking about. They're wrong. that Yisrael should not be hashud on Mishkav Zachur. Right? They're wrong that I shouldn't worry that there's any homosexual feelings or that there's actually going to be homosexual action taken in a society where I have it all over the place and it's part of my possibilities and part of my life and I'm engaged with it constantly and so on. So of course it's going to happen. That's wrong, in my opinion. But it's a societal issue. The Hachamim do not consider this, and the Torah, for that matter, doesn't consider it to be actual intercourse in the sense of a male-female union. And that manifests legally. How so? In a male-female union, the only way that someone is culpable for the act that is prohibited is with warning. In other words, they have to be warned before it's done. What you're about to do is prohibited, which is why you can imagine it's impossible to find anybody culpable, because, go find yourself in this situation and then have witnesses and so on and so forth. But that's the rules. With male homosexual relations, you have to warn both individuals separately. That you don't have to do with the male-female, you just warn them. You warn the man, you assume that the relationship is the relationship. Here, it's not looked at as union. It's looked at as two people engaged in some physical interface. But it's not what we call normally bi'ah in the Torah. And therefore manifests legally that way. That's going to be important for later as well, when we tie it all together. So this question of to'eva, both places, when it presents this in Torah, it says it's a to'eva. It uses that word. What does the word mean? No, we don't know what the word means. We're not sure what the word means. In general, what the word means, it's something that is repelled. It's not accepted. It's something that's repelled. When the Torah says ta'ev tita'avenu, relax. When the Torah says ta'ev tita'avenu, about eating lizards or whatever, right? What it's saying is push it out. Reject it. Don't accept it in. To'eva simply means that it is something that isn't supposed to be welcomed. It's meant to be kept at a distance. Now, the interesting thing is, right? That's why you'll see to'eva, for example, they think it's an abomination to God. It's not an abomination to God. The Torah is making no moral statement at all on this issue. It's not saying anything moral about it. All it's saying is the act should not be welcomed. It is not to be welcomed. The act itself should be pushed out. I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove to you that that's the case from the Talmud. But it is a word that we use throughout Torah and Talmud to establish something that is to be kept at bay. So when it talks about, for example, talk about abomination, it says in number 15 from Mishlei, Misir ozno mishemoa Torah. When a person keeps his ear from learning and hearing Torah, which means that they reject wisdom, they're not interested in learning, that person's tefillah, the prayer of that person, is a to'eva. Is it an abomination? No, God doesn't listen. It's kept out. So everybody, probably, in this room, at one time or another in their life, right, is subject to being called a to'eva, right, an abomination, because good luck. Who of us has not spent time saying, I'm really not interested in going to shiur tonight. And I'm not really interested in learning what I have to learn. And your prayer is an abomination. It's not saying that your prayer is an abomination. What it's saying is your prayer is not accepted. It's something that is kept out. It's not kind. Make no mistake. It's not a welcoming term. But it isn't a moral statement. What it's saying is it's not accepting. Interestingly, the majority of the Hachamim don't even attribute the to'eva to God. That's the interesting thing. They don't even say that the to'eva is a God problem. Because notice, in both, it doesn't say to'avat Hashem hi. It does say that about other mitzvot. that it is an abomination or it is a rejected thing to God. It doesn't say that here. What it says is it itself is an act of toeva. Which means what? Says the Ibn Ezra, a person's soul doesn't mesh well with it. That's what the Ibn Ezra says. Good. You can agree, disagree with the Ibn Ezra, but that's what he says. He says, Nafsho shel adam nit'av. A nefesh kadosh, he says, a holy soul has a problem finding connection this way in a world. You can argue. Many people may very well argue with that. But that's how he defines the word. Has nothing to do with God per se in terms of abomination and rejection and so on and so forth. What does the Gemara say? Listen to this story. It's a fantastic story. The Gemara says that in number 17. See, the Ibn Ezra is number 16 that I just quoted. Number 17 is as follows. Just for a little background on this. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who is one of the people in the story, and Bar Kapara, who's the other person in the story. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the man who essentially compiled the Mishnah. We call him Rabbeinu HaKadosh, or Rabbi for short, which simply means my Rav. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was an exorbitantly wealthy man. And his son-in-law, who was getting married to his daughter, and this occurs at the wedding of his daughter, was also an exorbitantly wealthy young man. Right? So money was marrying money. This was a posh wedding. Bar Kapara couldn't stand Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's seriousness and elitist nature and so on and so forth. And he felt that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was losing his soul as a result of this. So what the Bar Kapara used to do was get Rabbi Yehuda Nasi to laugh at himself all the time. Or to laugh in general. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would say to him, I told you, please stop making me laugh. When I laugh, bad things happen. It was a whole thing between them, back and forth. So Bar Kapara used to do slapstick stuff. You know, he'd put planters on his head and knock on the door and say, hi, here I am to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and all that. When this wedding was going down, they didn't invite Bar Kapara because they knew that he's a troublemaker and he's going to mess up the whole wedding. He crashed the wedding. First, he graffitied the wedding tent. I'm serious. You have to read the whole story. I didn't put the whole story here. He graffitied the wedding tent. He said, a waste of money and whatever. Goes into the wedding. And he comes up to the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and of course he strikes up a conversation. Of course, what does he choose to talk about? Homosexual acts and sex at the wedding. And by the way, what does toeva mean? He asks Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He goes, tell me, what do you think toeva means in that pasuk? Which should be, you're talking about the man who is the Nasi of Israel, right? He's not only the chief rabbi of Israel, he is the chief political leader of Israel. He represents the people of Israel to Caesar. He is recognized politically, okay? This man wrote the Mishnah. He's a big guy. We're asking about a translation of a word. So obviously, if Bar Kapara is asking him, what does the word mean? He's asking more than the translation. No? He's saying, what does it mean? You hear me? Okay. Bar Kapara asks him, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi offers an answer. Bar Kapara says, no good. And he rejects it. Not just because he rejects it appropriately. Because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, if he felt that he was right, and his rejection wasn't an appropriate rejection, he would say, I am right. This is the reason. But he doesn't. He accepts the rejection. So take a look. Okay? Amar Bar Kapara Rabbi. He said to Rabbi, my toeva. Tell me, what does it mean, toeva? Kol de amarle, everything Rabbi said to him, de'achinu, that this is what it is, toeva, parcha Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara rejected every single thing that he said. He'd give this, no good. No good. Maybe it means no good. Wrong. Okay. So finally Rabbi said, okay, so you tell me what it means. He goes, I'll tell you what it means if your wife pours me some wine. At this point, you're ready to throw the guy out of the wedding. Not Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, no. He wants to know what it means. This is a rabbi. It's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. I'm not going to leave it here. He values what Bar Kapara is going to say. I have to find out what he's going to say. He says, sweetheart, can you pour him? His wine is low. Fine. Pours the wine. He goes, now can you tell me, what do you say it is? He goes, dance for me, and I'll tell you what it is. He dances for him, so that he can hear how he explains it. Look at, unbelievable. I think that in itself is a beautiful story. That he's prepared to do all just to hear the explanation of one word. from Bar Kapara. So Bar Kapara says, he says, Kum rekod, go dance for you. He says, Amar lach, hachi amar hamana. Toreva, you know what toreva means? Toreataba. It's just drives that are off a bit. Toreh literally means not tit, vav ayin, which means mistake. Toreh with a taf means it's off the beaten path. It's a little bit variant. That's what it means. Variant. He said, okay, yeah. Okay, I get that. That's what it means. It's a sexual drive that's variant a little bit. It's from regular, whole society. So you see, they've taken this word toyava, which everybody translates as abomination, which I'm saying to you in its simple meaning simply means that it's rejected. And he brings it down even lower. He takes the teeth away from it, saying, look, what we've got going on over here is that the act itself is off kilter. That's how they explained it. Okay? Very interesting. So what we have here is a very important situation, and that is that even as far as Torah is concerned, Torah rejected the act. There's no way that we're going to get around that. That's the truth. As far as Torah is concerned, and halakha is concerned, Orthodox Judaism is concerned, the act is prohibited. And there is no way that the act can find a permitted situation. The act. No way. But what we have to recognize over here is that everything else that surrounds the act is completely our own construction. The way we feel about it, whether we think it's natural, not natural, acceptable, not acceptable, all of it is our own exception. It's our own determination. It is not different than any other prohibition in the Torah of like levels. And I'm telling you that we tolerate loads of prohibitions that are worse than this without batting an eye. But this we can't handle. And the only reason we can't handle it is because societal norms, not the Torah. The Torah doesn't go out of its way to say anything more about it. You don't hear another thing about it. Not even the Talmud, you don't hear another thing about it. It says, look, we don't like when they write ketubah contracts with each other. They actually decide to. Gemara doesn't like it. But that's it. So Rabbi Rappaport, who wrote this book on Judaism and homosexuality, Rav Chaim Rappaport, he was very brave to do so. He got a lot of heat for doing it. He writes very simply, in number 18, there does not seem to be, however, any reference in Torah literature to the phenomenon of homosexual orientation. Because it's talking historically. There was never any reference in all of history and humanity to homosexual orientation. Consequently, there's no discussion in rabbinic writings about whether or not it's possible for a person to choose or select his sexual orientation. As a matter of fact, and I'm saying this, it's irrelevant as far as the Torah is concerned. Doesn't matter. It's not a question. It doesn't matter how it is that a person gets there. The act is the act. You want to say it's acceptable, not acceptable, fair, not fair, we'll talk about that at the end. But that's the presentation of Torah. And so Torah doesn't address it. In the absence of any contrary teachings, it's responsible to believe that a faithful Jew has no cause to reject the current appreciation of an exclusive homosexual orientation. Developed by nature or nurture, as indicated by so much empirical, scientific, and psychological evidence. So whatever hang-ups you have are yours. Don't hang them on the Torah. Unless you're prepared to start acting in the same way to people who speak Lashon Hara, and to people who embarrass others in public, and to people who assassinate character, and to people who are Mechalel Shabbat, and to people who, should I go on? People, you want to talk about sexual prohibitions? Should we talk about the level of sexual prohibition that is running rampant on a daily basis in every person in society today, in Jewish society? Who are we kidding? Literally, everybody's so holier than thou. Because this particular act, you don't see how it is that it's attractive. Probably, more often than not, because you've convinced yourself that you're not attracted to it. But what have you? Good, so you're exclusively heterosexual. Chazaku Baruch. Yeah? Good. Great. So you have no capacity to find attraction in any one of your same sex. Usually there's something wrong with you if that's the case. No, I'm serious. Usually there's something wrong with you if that's the case. I'm not saying that you have to get all hot and bothered and excited, but you can't see attraction in somebody of the same sex. You don't see beauty. There's something wrong. In that you cannot see in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creation outside of your own narrow, parochial, myopic view. And there's a serious problem with that. Not to mention the massive problem of treating other people who happen to be dealing with issues of falling in Isur with callousness and disdain and all kinds of abominable behavior. That's abominable behavior. You like to pick and choose. I'm not saying you, right? I'm saying they, but I'm saying you, right? Like to pick and choose. Should we put them up to the Torah? What kind of a stupid question is that? It's a stupid question. It's not even a question that's worth discussion. You know how many people you should not be putting up to the Torah if you're going to start making that kind of scrutiny? You can't get a minyan. Forget about it. You won't be able to fill the synagogue. You will not be able to read a Torah if that's the scrutiny that you're going to start making. Should we start asking whose wife goes to mikveh? And when? And how? And what their sexual history is? Should we? Should we start doing a witch hunt like that and getting everybody on paper and start checking out whether we should put them up to the Torah or not? I mean, come on. It is entirely societal. Has nothing to do with Torah. Outside of Torah dealing with the fact that Jewish people have problems keeping the Torah. I don't mean to make light of that. It's a problem. It's an issue. But who's going to sit here and say that I don't have problems in terms of keeping the Torah? The reality is that at least in this situation, you have, in the majority of situations with homosexuality, is a serious difficulty in terms of being able to curb drives. Nobody wants to be in that fight, realistically. And everybody knows you failed in that fight every single time. Maybe you have a few valiant situations where you're able to overcome it. It doesn't matter your orientation, it matters what you do with it. How you act in terms of your sexuality, and that's what the Torah is concerned with, because your whole identity is based on it. So there's nobody that's innocent in this. And I'm going to show you that outside of the act of intercourse itself, anything else is completely part of what's shayach or applicable to all of us. There's nothing else that is specifically prohibited in terms of homosexuality except the act. As far as any other foreplay or anything like that, it's part of everything else that's either prohibited for me, for you, for whoever it is. I have to be careful with my sexuality and how I act in terms of my sexual expression. But it's not a particular thing that's wrong in terms of homosexual acts. It's just sex and how we act in terms of sex. That's it. So we've got to put things into perspective and realize really what it is that we're dealing with. And look at it realistically. The Torah is not making a moral statement over here specifically. What it's saying is this is not something that we are accepting into the broad society as accepting it in terms of normal. That hurts. I understand that. But that right now, as far as we've got, as far as the law is concerned, I can't pretend that it isn't. That's the reality. But it's no different than anybody else who's doing severe transgressions in the Torah, and welcome to the club. No, seriously, it's just that we're uneducated. We have no idea what the heck we're doing. This one's famous, so everybody knows it. And I know this one. This was bad. That's bad. Right? You don't even know what bad is. How about the fact that if you speak Lashon Hara regularly, you're locked out of Olam Haba? Locked out. So you may not care, because you don't believe in Olam Haba. Good. Hazaku Baruch to you too. But most of us are recognizing that we live an emergent life, and that we expect life to emerge into something more, and that's what we call Olam Haba. Locked out. A person who regularly speaks Lashon Hara, and you know what Rambam says about a person who's locked out of Lashon Hara? Locked out of Olam Haba? It is the worst possible punishment that a person could ever experience. It doesn't say that about homosexuality. They've got hope. People who gossip around, curtains. Nobody thinks about that. Nobody thinks about the fact that it's precisely the same punishment to drive your car on Shabbat as it is this. But that, we expect that everybody should look at, what do you want? So what? I do it, I don't do it. You're going to judge me because I drive. Nobody's judging anybody. Just call a spade a spade. Stop removing it from its context. It's exactly the same. Oh, no, you're going to say, well, this one, it's one of the big three. Idol worship, sexual prohibitions, and murder. You have to die before you do. Yes, okay, that is also true. It's very serious. Our sexual lives, like I said at the very beginning, are very serious. To the point that, yes, if there's a question of you doing a sexual prohibition or dying before you do it, the mandate is, under most circumstances, that you have to die before you do it. Which means that most of us are chayav mitah, on one level or another. Because we do it very freely. I'm telling you, you don't want to start searching into your sexual history. En bait she'en shamet. There's no house that doesn't have a dead body in it somewhere. There are plenty of skeletons in everybody's closet. So let's not sit on the high horse. So understanding that's the case, and putting it into perspective, there's something else that we have to address, and this is what I want to address for the last half hour of class. Things changed in human society. Things changed in human society that the Torah also preempted and predated. And that is that suddenly people started marrying for love. Never happened before. Very rarely did anybody marry for love. Why did people marry? Status, land, children, family, what have you. If you were in the Western world and you were at the front of the tide of the romantic development, then you were already ahead of the time, and you were there in that world where people were getting married for love. It was so nice, everybody liked it. If you were like my grandparents, back in Halab, you were doing this 50 years, 60, 70, 80 years ago. Still, you were getting married because it was the right marriage. You just got to choose. When they asked you want to marry Azra? Yeah, okay. Okay. Yalla. Make the bazra. Meanwhile, the life is over. She's walking down. I asked my grandmother, my father's mother, I was a very brazen child. I asked my grandma, I said, Grandma, did you love Grandpa when you married him? She said, no. She goes, but I love him very much now. Yeah, okay, so you've invested your entire life together, you raised children together, you went through trials and tribulations together, you went through successes and failures together, and so on and so forth. You love. Okay, good. They had a good marriage. But don't take for granted that that's how people married. They did not marry for love. For the majority of human history, okay? For the majority of human history, they did not marry for love. That's not what went into a relationship. So the sex in a relationship wasn't particularly loving. It was sexual, and I'm sure that there was gratification in terms of pleasure, but they had kids, and that was just what happened. There wasn't a lot of sensitivity. Till today, there's not a tremendous amount of sensitivity in the majority of relationships. People don't know how to make love. Because love's really difficult for us. So I need to go through classes and things in order to be able to understand how it is that I'm supposed to stop being an animal and actually be a human being in the bedroom. Like we've got this all worked out, Nobody has this worked out. Very few people have it worked out, and it is a tremendous task and a tremendous amount of work. You know what the Torah did 3,000 years ago? It set the ball rolling. It is to date the only legal code that demands that a husband spend time with his wife emotionally. The only legal code in all of human history. that demands that a man has to spend certain frequency of time with his wife emotionally, under her terms, not his. That is the beginnings of love. When the Torah says to you on your first year of marriage, also, the own time, Naki lebeto shana hat. You be clean by your house for a year, meaning you're not allowed to go off on a business trip, you're not allowed to go leave the house, you're not allowed to be out late at night excessively. You be home. For 1 year, v'simach et ishtor shelakach, and make your wife happy that you took. That's your business. For the entire first year, it doesn't mean the rest of the years you don't have to. You're building the foundation in that first year. All of your efforts have to be focused on that. There's no code in all of human history that requires that. And then to say, She'era ksuta ve'onata lo igra, that not only her clothing and not her dwelling, her time is not to be diminished, literally is what ona means. So ona can be manifest in sexual union, but on her terms, not on the man's terms. The man is at her mercy as far as this is concerned. And by the way, it is a Torah transgression not to keep it. So talk about frum. Nobody keeps this appropriately. Very rarely does anyone keep this law appropriately. It is an isur lav. It is the same thing as eating pork, to transgress this law. Just to put it into framework for you, it's the exact same thing as eating pork. It says don't eat pork, don't make sure that you do not relinquish or be lax on the time that you spend with your wife that you have to spend. The exact same thing. We would whip you for one and whip you for the other. So, the situation is that a man has to do what's called ona, which means that he has to spend time with his wife. Often, it includes sexual union if she wishes. If she just wants to spend time and cuddle, then that's what you do. And that the Rishonim right, Poskim right. It's dependent on her. And the frequency depends on your capacity as a man. So if you have work that really taxes you and so on and so forth, the frequency will depend on what it is that you're doing. But guess what? If you need to change jobs or you want to change jobs, and your job is going from being a tailor to a camel driver, which happen to be the examples that are given in the old texts, and camel drivers are not really home very often, and tailors home every night, if she says, you're not going to be a camel driver, you may not be one. Yeah, but the money, it's so much better. I don't care about the money, I care about you. You're not allowed to. And if you do, go eat pork. It's the same thing. So do you understand that love is being rudimentarily cultivated in marriage? It's encouraging emotional presence. Physical, emotional, personal presence in marriage. Do you understand 3,000 years ago how completely odd this was? Completely out of the realm of what a marriage required? Or what anybody expected their responsibility was in a marriage? How many's doing it today? How many people are doing this today appropriately? They think it's an act, it's mechanics. It's not mechanics. It's in her terms. So if this is taken care of, mitzvah onah is taken care of, and the woman is not satisfied, you haven't fulfilled the obligation. She needs to be satisfied, not the man. The man, it's easy. It's not a big deal. That's the reality. Why am I saying this? Because in Torah, the reality is, the only sex really that is not only permitted, but encouraged and celebrated, is within the bond of marriage. It sounds very Christian. But I'm going to tell you the difference between Christian approach to sex and Jewish approach to sex. As far as the Christians are concerned, sex is bad, except in particular circumstances. As far as Jews are concerned, sex is good, except in particular circumstances. That's the difference. So what the Torah does is say, listen, in terms of sexual union, love should be present. Even if it is not in love, but there is bond and covenant at the base, which is the base, and that there's mutual care, that is where sex should happen. Sex should not happen where you don't have that. I'm not saying that it doesn't apply elsewhere, right? But that is where the Torah provides it. Why is the Torah provided in terms of marriage? Because it is in that union that life occurs. I want you to hear me very carefully. I'm not being a Christian and saying that the only sex that's allowed is procreative sex. That's not true. Sex is fine, even if it's not procreative. But it is in Torah meant to be within the relationship that brought life into being. It's not a moral determination. I want you to hear clearly, and I'm going to qualify what I'm saying because there's a tendency to hear what I'm saying in very religious Christian terms. Okay? I'm not a Christian, and I'm not saying it in religious Christian terms. So try and undress it. Forgive me for the pun. Okay. The issue is that sex in Torah is really relegated to very narrow circumstances. In other words, the sex drive is essentially opened to interaction and for it to occur in a relationship that is potentially capable, or that was potentially capable, or that on some level was able to be in prototype what brings life into a world. Why? Because we are celebrating it. So even when it is not directly translated into procreation, it is celebrated in the act. So simchat onah, the joy of sex, which is really what the Hachamim call simchat onah, in and of itself doesn't have to be procreative by any means. But the milieu that is occurring, the union that is occurring, is one that in prototype brought life into this planet. And we celebrate that. And that's where the Torah brings it, so it has to have love. The interesting thing is that if I don't have the covenant involved, even in my own marriage I find prohibition in terms of being able to engage in sex. If there's any indication that you have now objectified the situation, or that there is no covenant engaged in this situation, you can't have sex with your wife. Take a look at number 25. Excuse me, not number 25, number 26. V'chen asru hachamim. The hachamim prohibited shelo yeshamesh adam mitatov v'libo mechasher b'isha acheret. You're not allowed to be with your wife and you think of another woman while you're with her. It's her or get out of the bedroom. V'lo yivrol mitoch shechrut. You can't be drunk. Lo mitoch mirva. You can't be arguing. Lo mitoch sinah. You cannot hate her or have bad feelings towards her. She's not an object. And this is not a mechanical act. So that's prohibited. Lo yavo aleh al korha, certainly not against her will. V'hira mimeno, she has any type of fear. Lo k'shehad min menudeh, if they're excommunicated, that's a different issue. Lo yavo aleha, this is an important one. Asher ahar shegamar b'yivo legarasha. You decided you're getting a divorce? Get out of the bedroom. You're divorcing her. There's no covenant, and there's no love. It's prohibited. You see? So what the Torah creates is this very unique and specific sphere where human sex in terms of act is permitted and encouraged and cultivated. Outside of that sphere, it's withdrawn because A, it is not something that connects back to the celebration of the cultivation of life, and B, because it is something that very easily becomes reduced into the act. So one may say, yes, okay, but if two men love each other very passionately, very deeply, then they should be able to do this. Perhaps. The Rambam would say, listen, the Torah doesn't work for everybody. And it's very sad that that's the case. But it is the case. The interesting thing is, and the important thing is, the Torah doesn't sanction love at all. It encourages it. You know what the problem has been? Men have not been able to love each other in this world. In any real sense. It's the reason why everybody thinks that David and Yonatan, David and Jonathan, were homosexual. Because they couldn't imagine that two men should love each other so much and not get into bed with each other. Doesn't show any indication of that whatsoever in the Pesukim, and People tend to love reading that into the Pesukim all the time. No indication whatsoever. What it says, they married each other. In terms of friendship rings. It says they established a covenant between each other. They loved each other soul to soul. They were soulmates. So, you know what happens to us in a Western world? We can't think of that without sex. And that's a problem. Because, listen very carefully, because this is probably going to be the one part of the shiur that's going to be difficult for everybody to absorb and grasp. And I take for granted that I've been thinking in these things for a long time, and the audience not necessarily. Love is not divorced from sex. But it isn't the same. When we love in a mature fashion, appropriately, properly, it isn't personal. There's no personal in genuine, pure, holy love. What do I mean by that? There's no need. The way that Erich Fromm puts it very eloquently and beautifully is, and we'll quote this very often, immature love says, I love you because I need you. Mature love says, I need you because I love you. My nafkamina. What's the difference? In the first statement, which is immature, the goal or the object of my thought is my need. I need you because I need you. And I'm filling something in myself, and that's why I'm holding on to you. You know what that creates in human interactions? A level of infatuation. And infatuation is nice, but it's not something that lasts, and you can't build on it, and it's not something that ultimately you can have a life with and develop on. Because it's all a question of need. In Pirkei Avot, we call that ahava shetluya badavar. It is love that is tied to something else. And that's exactly what Fromm is talking about. I love you because I need you. I need you because I love you is a completely different thing. The end is the love itself. The sharing of two people. The sharing of souls. And so I feel a need for you because I love you. Why do you love me? Because I just do. And if a person has not experienced it, which is sad, but it's one of the most amazing experiences of human life, you can't explain why you love someone. When you start to explain, it breaks down. The worst thing that you could ever have yourself put in a position to do is to explain to the one you love why you love them. Let me count the ways. Oh, fantastic. Great. Because I just do. What does it mean? I love your being. You, your existence. You're an expression of God. And I see it in your eyes. I feel it in your presence. Through you, I interact with an expression of God that is absolutely unique. Unmatched. Nothing like it. You can fall in love with that. Doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman. You don't necessarily have to take him to bed. It may be what you want to do. Could be. I'm just saying, it doesn't mean that it has to happen. We have not been allowed to love. Men in this world have not been allowed to love other men. You know why? Because we always worry that there's going to be sex at the end of it. And that if you say that you find the man attractive because you want to take him to bed. Women have no problem with this. Women can say that other women are beautiful and attractive all the time. No. I think he's gorgeous. Rabbi, do we need to talk? I mean, right? Why shouldn't I be able to say that? Society doesn't accept it. It's the only reason. You pretend that you don't think that. And you know what happens when you pretend you don't think that? You go back home and you're alone and you realize, there's something wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. That's part of living in a world, for God's sakes. Being a human being with a heart that beats and blood that runs through your vein and loving a creation that God created. You don't have to take everything to bed. But men have real problem with that. And you know why we have real problem with that? Because we've never been allowed to love. It's never been acceptable. We've always been relegated to being the sex machine. Excuse me for, the bleeding heart man here, in society. But there is what to be said for this. So you can complain that we put ourselves into the situation. Yeah, it's part of evolution. It's the way that the roles played out. But men are capable of love. And the Torah cultivates it. And it is why the Torah takes the relationship of David and Yonatan and puts it on display. Look how early it was. How before the whole sexual revolution, and you should know that ironically, the sexual revolution opened the doors for this. With all of the other junk that it brought with it, it opened the doors for us being able to hang our hang-ups at the door. So the Torah talks about David and Yonatan. You look at them, read this. It's insane. Number 28. David's talking to Shaul after he slayed Goliath. Right? So he's talking to Shaul, and Shaul is enamored with David because he just slayed this giant, right? And David's like, young, beautiful kid. We're told that he's beautiful, right? He's tov ro'i, he's. So Shaul's talking to him, and who's watching? Yonatan is watching. His father, the king, talked to this young man. He finishes the conversation. V'nefesh Yonatan nikshira b'nefesh David, and the soul of Yonatan was bound to the soul of David. That's falling in love. Notice the language of the pasuk. Vayhi kechaloto ledaber. It's like an immediate. There's David. Vayehavehu Yonatan kenafsho, and Yonatan loved him like his own soul. Now you tell me which man is comfortable enough to say that he loves another man this way. Yeah? Vayichrot Yonatan veDavid brit. Immediately, they establish a covenant between each other. They know, he knows that I know that you know that I know that you know that we love each other. This is what it is. We love each other. So what does he do? He takes off his coat and he gives it to him, and he takes off his sword and he gives it to him as an act of establishing covenant with him. He doesn't get undressed. You're not naked now, Yonatan, right? He takes off his cloak and his sword, and he gives him his belt, and he says, these are my trappings, I'm giving them to you. It's an act of covenant. What does he say? So it's what David says about, this is just Yonatan. What does David say about this love after Yonatan dies? He says to him, Nifle'at ahavatcha li me'ahavat nafshim. Very strange thing. He says, your love for me was beyond. Pele means it's out of the normal. It's extraordinary. That's literally what Pele means. Your love for me was more extraordinary than love of women. What's David saying? David's saying, the way that I understand it, I interpret it, David is saying over here, I didn't have any of that sexual tension with you. It was pure. We could love each other completely and wholly. I could hug you and kiss you and caress you and talk to you and be intimate with you. And none of that dissonance of the basal elements of sexuality that we draw with us from primal situations, it wasn't present. That's how pure our love was. And that's what David is saying to him. And that's why, let's take a look at the Mitzvah Tzion. He says, Nifle'ata. Nifle'ata means, Inyano davar asher tiksheh sagado v'tamua. It's so beyond that it's very odd, which is precisely why everybody thinks that they were having sex. Because you can't imagine that there would be such a closeness and intimacy, and it doesn't translate into sex, certainly with two men. But that's what it's saying. Nifle'ata means, it doesn't say it was much stronger love. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that it was more powerful. It doesn't say that. It says nifle'ata. It was extraordinary. It was beyond the norm. It wasn't regular. You know why it wasn't regular for them? Because no one else in society was secure enough, vulnerable enough, spiritual enough, loving enough to allow themselves to be able to have such a relationship. And that is a serious problem for us. Because we don't allow it. And so when we talk about somebody who is gay, which is a new word, all of that comes about in terms of its connections to the fact that we as a society in the 1700s began to allow ourselves to marry for love. And that started the ball rolling. We're going to talk about love now? Well, I mean, that's a fantastic idea. Could I love another man? Well, I mean, we couldn't even talk about that until very recently. But that immediately raised the question. When it wasn't a question of love, not in heterosexual situations, not in homosexual situations, it wasn't a question. So I didn't, I felt it, it wasn't something that anybody realistically felt that could be part of their life in any prolonged sense. So all you had was the act of sex, and the act of sex happened in bisexual ways all over the place throughout all of human society. Once you started talking about love and living a life of commitment and so on and so forth, immediately the question comes up. And what if I'm a man and I love another man? That's unfathomable? Of course it's fathomable. Of course it's perfectly normal. Good. So what does that mean as far as sex is concerned? Well, we've got to talk about that. There's a situation we've got. It's an uncomfortable, difficult to navigate situation. But all of the other things, the morality of it and how you're going to accept it and going to embrace it and recognize and not recognize and what you're going to... It's a non-question. It's a non-issue. Really, I'm telling you, you would have to clear the whole shul if you're going to start asking these questions. Clear the whole synagogue. You understand? There would be no board. There would be no people. There would be no anything. We could all just rot in hell, every one of us. Literally, be honest. This is what the situation is. So stop with the nonsense. It's insane already. Doesn't matter how long the beard is, how long the black coat is, everyone is sinning. I hate to sound like, the fire and brimstone priest, up in the thing. But that's the truth. It's just that they have their own sins, that's all. What do you think? That religious people don't assassinate character and embarrass people publicly and judge people unfavorably all the time and destroy people's businesses and careers and assassinate people in board? You think that's not happening? Right? By the way, look through the prophets. All of the Nevi'im. Which sins are the ones that they keep talking to people about? Which ones? Tefillin? Not once throughout the whole thing. You haven't been putting on tefillin. And the wrath of God is going to come. No, that you don't hear. Seriously. One thing you hear is Shabbat. Not very often, but you hear it. You know what you hear over and over and over? I'm writing on the Haftarah now. So anybody who's following my Haftarah thing, you probably sense that there's a theme in all of this. I'm not the one choosing the theme. The whole of the Haftarot, of all of the Nevi'im, is relationship. So I'm writing about every single facet of relationship. Because it's all it is. All they come and say is, something, you don't love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No, of course you don't. You don't know how to love. You can't even love a person. Forget about love. You don't even love your wife. How are you supposed to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu? You don't love, you don't care, you don't this, that's the whole of the Nevi'im. So you know what the Nevi'im say? Fight for the orphan. Fight for the poor, for the widow. Make sure that you don't speak badly to your neighbor. That's what the Navi is saying through the whole thing. You show me one time, the Shatnez situation, we've really got to deal with that. You get the prophet coming down and the Shatnez. No, never. It doesn't happen throughout the whole thing. That we can work out. I'm not saying, please understand me in the camera. Please understand me. It's important. I'm not saying Shatnez is not important. What I'm saying is understand what we're dealing with here. Look at it in context. The Hachamim talk about the Nevi'im talk about those things. What every Jew transgresses till today. Rabbi, not rabbi, religious, not religious. Everyone is doing the same thing. Still. So stop with the nonsense. They shouldn't go up to the Torah. So you want to start knocking people down? Who should go to the Torah? Who should lead services? Who should... Stop already. You know what the rule is for a chazan as to who's allowed to lead services? You can't find one. Not only does he have to know Tanakh, and he has to be well read, he could never have had bad things said about him from his youth, that he was off and doing things that he shouldn't have been doing. Good luck, go find a diva Hazan that's going to be that guy, right? Good luck! Who are we kidding? You know, you look at love, and we've got a problem. So, I'm going to end with this. Rambam, you'll understand why I'm saying this in a minute. Rambam says something absolutely remarkable about Christianity and Islam. I want you to understand that the Rambam had to run for his life from the Muslims and the Christians. He was running from city to city because of them. His life was genuinely in danger because of them, more than once. And he said, Islam and Christianity is the best thing that has happened to the world to date. Why, he says? This is, by the way, if you want to see it, I'm not reading it inside. If you want to see it, it's on number 37. It says the best thing that happened today. Why? He goes, you know what they did? They took the Torah and they put it on the map. Before them, it was just a little book that this little tribe read and kept. Nobody cared. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about the Torah. And everyone's talking about the mitzvot. And everyone's talking about the Messiah. And everybody's thinking about things that only Israel knew. Do you have any idea how crazy that is? We take it for granted. Do you understand that it was completely against all odds that some small Hebrew tribe in a tiny little strip of land on the planet somewhere has a little book that they think is important, and all of a sudden the entire religious world, for all intents and purposes, now have based themselves on that book, have to negotiate how they deal with those mitzvot and why they're not keeping them, and so on and so forth. So I'm saying, I was running for my life from them. It's a mess. They're really not nice. But the bottom line is, it's the best thing that has happened to the world to date. Because look at the progress. So what the Rambam is doing is he's saying, look, there's a lot of not comfortable situations in it, but it's bringing the world forward. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say something. I know the Rambam, and I could be completely wrong, and for this I may be very badly ridiculed. I genuinely believe that the entire revolution of feminism and even homosexuality in our society, I don't think it's perfectly stable and well and so on and so forth, but I think the entire revolution is a fantastic development for humanity. Sure, there's many things that aren't good and that we're not happy with, and it creates all types of discussions. But you know what homosexuality in society has done? It has forced us to look at how we deal with love between people of the same sex. And it has reduced the taboo of my children, of me, of my grandchildren, being able to love another human being, same sex, genuinely, to show affection to someone else, to hug and kiss someone else, to genuinely express love without worry, to be able to compliment without worry of being seen as being deviant and problematic. The sex, like I said, it's an issue, and it's there. It's not going away, and it is what it is. But I'm saying that if we deal with these peripheral issues, it changes the entire nature of how it is that we address these things. And that's good for society. It's good that we should be able to love and not have to worry. That I should be able to express love. That I should be able to give a hug and not have to worry that I'm a pariah. And the reason why we don't have it right yet, I'm saying there's problems. You think of it, are we really going to let a male teacher hug my child? God forbid. Well, the reason why you can't is because nobody's been trained. It's been so pent up and so taboo and so horribly relegated to the sides of society that it's been destroyed. So nobody knows how to deal with it. But if it is cultivated and it's taught and people are able to genuinely grow and mature in terms of this, children are missing out. I'm not talking about just children, I'm talking about people are missing out. We are starved for love in this society. Our fathers, many of our fathers, they couldn't even bring themselves to show their boys love. Couldn't even tell their boys, I love you. Couldn't kiss their boys, hug their boys. It is a tragedy. You don't do that. The Torah never says that you should not do that. And we destroy lives as a result of it. So there's serious things that this whole question of homosexuality in society raises and presents to us in front of us. And we have to address them. In the same way that the Rambam said, best thing that ever happened was Christianity and Islam. So at the end, there's on number 38, there's an article which I'm not going to go through reading, but you can read it on your own, which I think is very significant and meaningful. One of the things that it does say is that we shouldn't look at societal structures as being weak and irrelevant. Oftentimes, it's much easier to change biology than it is to change societal structures. And don't think that the creation of societal thought and meta thought in terms of a society is not real and not substantial. It is so powerful and so real that we have to recognize its reality. So it doesn't really matter why now we have a word called a homosexual or a person that's gay. You know why? We've created it. And it's fine because we've allowed for love. And we've allowed for mutual love. And it's no longer domination and pederasty and who knows what else. It's opened the door to human beings being able to love each other. And so we have to deal with that. And we're moving in the right direction. And so we have to see ultimately how it is that we deal with it in terms of Torah and society and so on and so forth. But I'll tell you one thing. If we do not hang our prejudices at the door when we deal with it, and we don't look at Torah as it is and what it's saying to us, and stop with the insane bigotry and prejudice that we've got, we will be on the outs. And society will move forward. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't wait for anybody. He's taking His world into love. You can bet your bottom dollar or pound or whatever you've got in your pocket on that. The world is moving towards love. And if you're not on the bandwagon, well then fine. You can stay back. But we're going to learn how to do it right. And we're going to learn how to be mature about it. And we're going to learn how to not take advantage of it. And we're going to learn how to not lose ourselves.